Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you all for coming today. I want to briefly address how things, at least in our mind, are going to work. We're going to have a brief statement where I'm going to address some of the newly found information, make some statements about the current status of the prosecution of the case, and then Mr. Bivens is going to address some other issues. Specifically, as some of you may or may not know, the family had a private autopsy conducted on Luis Rodriguez following his untimely death. We have actually obtained a copy of the autopsy report from the private autopsy, and it contradicts what was found by the state medical examiner. Within the findings, and I'll have copies available following the conclusion of the press conference, the findings were specifically that there was gross and microscopic examination indicate that this individual died of asphyxia caused by restricted respiration resulted by external forces. We find that this is important in part one because the state medical examiner clearly was influenced by the Moore Police Department. A review of the file indicates that there were multiple calls, multiple attempts to persuade the findings, and we feel like this is indicative of what exactly happened in this situation. Within the body of the private autopsy reports found by Dr. Min, he specifically finds that the arrhythmia, which is what the state medical examiner found, is not an anatomical diagnosis made by pathological examination. And along those lines, he found that the deceased did not have any history of significant episodes of arrhythmia in his medical history. Thus, the state medical examiner's conclusion must have been dependent upon the ECG monitoring done during the transportation to the hospital, since one cannot make such diagnosis by anatomical examination. Secondly, he found the most probable cause of arrhythmia found in the ambulance transportation must have been due to anoxia, caused by restricted breathing, caused by external restrictive forces applied by police during the arrest. And thirdly, he found on review of the video recordings of his arrest, the subject was lying face down on the ground, and several police officers were on top of his back, causing a situation known as positional asphyxia. In such position, the subject is bound to be restricted in the movement of his diaphragm for breathing. I have met personally with the district attorney, Greg Mashburn, for Cleveland County, and he's indicated that there's absolutely nothing that he would consider in order to prosecute the officers involved. As a result, and based on the findings that we have obtained through the private autopsy, we're prepared to move forward and ask that Eric Holder get involved and initiate a federal investigation into the untimely death of Luis Rodriguez. Additionally, as I think many of you have asked about, the family is also in a position at this point in order to attempt to seek some level of justice for Luis Rodriguez that we are going to initiate and pursue a civil action. Within the documents that we obtained from the ME's office, there are recordings of calls that were placed, efforts where members of the Moore Police Department were actually going up to the ME's office to speak to the medical examiner involved.
How many times, or can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because you said multiple, but
Right.
I'm looking for a little more clarity.
Yeah, I mean, I would say roughly, I didn't go through and count them, but I would say there was at least 5 instances where I could recall where multiple calls, like I said, were placed, and or I know on one specific occasion where officers went up there to specifically talk to the ME before the findings were released.
How do you know that wasn't just involving the case? How do you know it was in an effort to persuade them?
Well, I mean, I would just say common sense would say this. If you have an independent body who is out there investigating a situation like cause of death, there's nothing that the police department is going to add to the ME's findings. Medical examiners across the country on a day-to-day basis go out there and make determinations regarding someone's cause of death. And they don't need the specific findings. The ME had everything at their disposal necessary to come up with the conclusions. And so therefore the question becomes, why are you contacting? Why are you going up there and making multiple attempts to speak to the ME? I will say this. When I read both the ME's report state medical examiner's report, and then the subsequent findings made, or the, I guess, report that District Attorney Mashburn released regarding why they weren't going to prosecute. It appeared to be a end result, simply saying that because the ME found arrhythmia, as opposed to, in this case, asphyxia, then therefore he didn't think that the force that was utilized against Luis was sufficient enough to cause a heart attack. And in my mind, that just doesn't play. And so, I can't specifically say that in this instance, he's never prosecuted a police officer, but it's pretty easy to say when someone shoots someone that you're going to pursue that claim. There hasn't been a call. There has never been an attempt by anyone, from either the Moore Police Department or from the Warren Theater to contact the family and say, we're sorry for your loss. But what they did go out to do is hire attorneys. And so, we're prohibited from going out and contacting individuals that have retained counsel.